Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, I have decided to pull my name out of the portal. I'm coming back to Buckeye Weekly. I felt like it's probably the best option for me. Plus, I hear there's some good NIL cash around here somewhere. Haven't seen it yet, but I'm sure it's around here somewhere.
Tom, I feel terrible for having to say this. We have filled your roster spot with this an animate carbon rod. So sorry to see you go, but you're going to pack up your things, and I need you out of here by noon. So
all I heard was we need you out here at noon. So, okay, see you, Kevin. And now there's a roster spot open, and now we're back in business. All right, podcast ahoy.
Huzzah. So, yes.
This has all worked out perfectly.
It is Tuesday, one day before signing day, the first signing day, if you will. And so we thought we'd talk a little bit about what to expect, what may or may not happen, and all of the drama that we haven't really had a lot of drama the last few years with this early signing day. And you kind of know who is showing up, who isn't. And there haven't been, I think we've talked in the past about how it's pretty boring, or maybe that's also in February as well, when everything is already cut and dry and settled. But there is some drama coming this week, and maybe not even this week, but we may be waiting longer and into next month, when some defensive linemen decide at their respective All-American games. But let's talk about, there are three defensive linemen the Buckeyes are on right now. Favored for, that's defensive lineman Caden Curry, defensive lineman / tackle Hero Canoe, and defensive end edge rusher Omari Abor. And the uncertainty, is it correct to call uncertainty, the Larry Johnson situation, uncertainty, because he's the coach? There's been no strong suggestions that he won't be, other than, stuff we hear, but like nothing from Ohio State and in any way that he is not going to be there. So I guess we should assume he's still going to be here by signing day on Wednesday at the very least. And I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, Tom, but are Mario Abor and Hero Canoe, are they planning to sign tomorrow and then keeping it a secret and announcing it at their All-American games? I'm not sure if that's what they're doing, and maybe we should have talked about that beforehand.
Yeah, my understanding is that's the plan. Now, is that what they follow through on? I don't know, but the way it has been discussed is that they are going to sign on Wednesday, and then they just they keep it a secret until they announce at the All-American game. That's a pretty common thing. Is there a guarantee that they don't that they don't change their mind? No, of course they can change their mind anytime, but that's at least where things are supposed to be, as far as I'm aware.
So let's start with Caden Curry, who by the time you guys are listening to this may have already committed to Ohio State. We're going to assume he's going to choose Ohio State as we talk about him now, because that's been the assumption for at least maybe 2 years at this point. And I know Mark Givler has called him basically an in-state prospect for as many times as he's been to Ohio State. He's from the Indianapolis area, so he's made it over to Columbus enough times while he was able to travel anyway. And I only saw him once, and I go back to, that was 2 seasons ago. I guess the 2020 season, the day after Mark and I went to Chicago for the parents' protest at the Big Ten headquarters, which were closed. And but we came back and I watched Caden Curry play defensive tackle. And my first thought when I saw him was like, he's not even the biggest player on this defensive line. And he was listed at like 6'4", 250 on 24/7's website. And you look at him and he's like, I don't know, 6'2", 240, something like that. But then you watch him and they couldn't do anything with him. He was quick, he was fast, he was really impressive, but it was hard to project him as a defensive tackle. And then this year, I think there was more talk about him projecting as a defensive end. And now, Tom, as I see Jim Knowles' defensive line a little bit more as he fluctuates from a 3-down lineman and a 4-down lineman, I'm thinking maybe Caden Curry can fit into a defensive end position where he's more of a tweener, which is kind of what you need when you have that. Maybe he's a 3 tech, but he can flex and hold the edge as a defensive end when they go to that 3 down lineman look.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if he's kind of a little bit of like a Jayshon Cornell or Draymond Jones kind of type, where it's like you could play in either spot. And if you are going to have 3 guys down, you want those ends to be a little bit bigger. You don't necessarily want the Javonte Jean-Baptiste, Jack Sawyer guys being the ends. If you've only got 3 guys down, that's where that Leo spot that we've talked about, they may be slotted more there. Curry being a little bit more of a tweener, then you've got, maybe he fits better in that role. You do wonder how much he's going to grow, because you can, if you're 250, it doesn't take that much to get up to 270, 280 at that point. That's weight that, that's a year or two with Mick, and all of a sudden, ta-da, you're a traditional 3 tech. So that's not that would not be a big jump either. But yeah, he's someone who just you mentioned you've only seen him once, but every time anyone sees him, they always have like very, very positive things to say. Like he just kind of jumps off the field or off the film at you, as sometimes you go watch these guys and it's like, which one is the D1 prospect? Because sometimes you can't always tell. Like everyone who goes and sees him says, yeah, okay, yeah. Like there's no one is turning to the person next to him and go, which one is Caden Curry? It's like, oh yeah, no, that one right there. You can see him from the top row of the stands.
Yeah, I think he blocked a punt and returned it for a touchdown on the first or second drive that we watched last year. And it was, you go to these games, and if you're going to be shooting or covering a running back, like there's going to be a lot of footage. There's going to be a lot of highlights. And it's the same way when you're shooting him, and very impressive guy. Let's move to Hero Canoe, who blew up this summer as part of the tour from his football organization. He's from Germany originally, playing high school. It's in California, I believe, right, Tom?
Yes.
And so they were taking all of these summer visits and camping. And he's a guy who really latched on to Larry Johnson while camping, and I believe stayed over for one of the nights, not at Larry's, but in Columbus. And I don't want to say he came out of nowhere, but I mean, he certainly blew up. He's the 105th ranked player, the number 18 defensive lineman in 24/7's rankings. Now have a defensive line and edge. So he's more of a defensive tackle, 6'5", 293, obviously, and really like a young guy and still learning, but the way he moves, it's impressive. And it's certainly something that Ohio State could work with. And that would be a very big get for him. Ohio State's still the favorite, Georgia, Notre Dame, Oklahoma, Alabama, all of these others that are wanting him as well. So this is one of these signing day things that I guess I wonder if it'll come out, because a lot of times where, say Ohio State, say he signs with Ohio State on Wednesday, the Ohio State staff may be totally silent about him, but the staff that got spurned may let the reporters that cover that team know, to kind of just, throw a little shade or whatever, like spoil the surprise. Like, yeah, Georgia writer will be like, say, Hero Canoe is going to sign with Ohio State because, Georgia didn't get his NIL or his
NLI.
This is too many letters, Tom.
Too many TLAs.
But it'll be interesting to see if that comes out when he does sign. And certainly, at least it'll also give us, Tom, some drama for these All-American games as well, because I believe he's announcing his, and like I said, Omari Abor announcing his a week apart.
Yeah, and the crystal ball on Hero Canoe right now is 100% on Ohio State, and all of our guys are saying Ohio State. Mark is saying Ohio State. Bill's saying Ohio State. They're both saying it for Omari Abor as well. I don't think I think it would be a pretty big surprise, and it might take, there is the sort of unanswered question of, if something does happen with Larry Johnson, if this is the year that the Larry Johnson rumors are finally true, then what? Then how does that impact these guys? But right now, yeah, I would expect those two to be in the class as well, based on what all the people who really know what they're talking about are saying. So, when in doubt, I ask Bill and Alex and Mark, and they tell me, and then I go, oh yes, well, allow me to assure you, Tony, that these three, in fact, defensive linemen. But no, it's Hero Canoe. You're right. The connection with Larry Johnson was really obvious, because he was on this tour with this group from Germany, this group from Europe that was coming overseas. and they were at all these camps, just kind of like making the tour of the Midwest during the course of June. And they came to Ohio State one day, and the plan was, okay, the next day they're going to go to Michigan. The rest of the group went to Michigan. Hero Canoe stayed in Columbus to work with Larry Johnson for another day. It was like, why is he back? Like, what's okay? Well, there you go. That tells you all you need to know. Now, the $64,000 question then becomes: is it Ohio State or is it Larry Johnson with him? Because if Larry Johnson does leave, and again, we haven't heard anything official, but it's just there's enough smoke that people are sort of at least talking about it and thinking about it. If he does leave, how does that impact everyone else? All three of these guys. Caden Curry, it sure feels like Caden Curry, like Mark said, basically an in-state prospect. Like his whole family's from Ohio. He's in Indianapolis. It's not far. He I think has a lot of Ohio State fans in his family. So, he's probably of the three the most likely to stick if something does happen with Larry Johnson. The other two guys are a little bit more of an open question. But, to add all three of those guys, right now, this is not, if you just look at the commits page on the Ohio State recruiting class, it does not look like a Larry Johnson class. You add these three guys, and all of a sudden you've got Kenyatta Jackson, you've got those three guys. Then all of a sudden it's like, oh, now they have four top guys, top 105 defensive linemen. It's like, oh, okay, that looks like a Larry Johnson class.
It is a concern because you need these late commits, and Ohio State, I don't know if they really rely on late commits all the time. They seem to get these guys in sooner, but this is also a recruiting calendar that, while it's moving faster, it's been pushed back because of last year. So all of these guys are a little bit slowed down in terms of visiting and just doing all of the deciding that normally moves a lot faster. Omari Abor, a 6'4", 240-pound edge rusher out of Duncanville, Texas, borderline 5-star guy. Is the number 38 player in the nation, number 4 edge, 4-star guy. The crystal ball on him is a 75% pointed at Ohio State with 6 predictions. I know Mark and Bill, and I think Alex have all said they still see him at Ohio State. There was some drama with some of his tweets and people trying to interpret his tweets, and you just be careful with that stuff. I'm not saying it's like like a Ouija board. Just whatever. Just be careful with that stuff. It can get a little crazy. But interpreting tweets from high school kids and college kids, it's never it's worse than tailing plane numbers. Tom, certainly.
That's journalism, sir. How dare you? Yeah, I mean, it's the thing about tweets and guys changing their bios and all that kind of stuff is it's very easy to change your bio. Will Johnson, the cornerback commit from Michigan, changed his bio, had Ohio State in his bio, took Michigan out of his bio at one point. Like, you can just kind of like do stuff just to get a little attention, just to mess with people, and not actually sort of have changed your mind. Just kind of like, oh, just gonna put, I'll just put something here. I'm not going to draw any attention to it. And then when someone notices it, it's going to be like, oh, look what I found. Oh man. And then it just explodes into, and then Tony, how many times have you seen recruits tweet at another recruit who also uncommitted saying, is this the move? ? Like, it's just like, guess what? Then you're going to pick up 300 fans of that team to follow you on Twitter. And as we have seen, building up a Twitter following can lead to good NIL, which there's a little bit of a game being played here, I think, at times. But, at some point you do have to put pen to paper, and then the game stops. So yeah, you're better off, I think, listening to Bill, listening to Mark, listening to Alex, and not trying to read the tea leaves or read the goat entrails on someone's tweets or Twitter bio, or is that a Brutus bobblehead in the back of the picture in his room? Like, yeah, just leave this much like stunt work. Leave it to the experts, I guess.
It is, when you do, I don't want to say pander for followers, but when you pander for followers, these are the same people that are going to then tell you how much you suck when you choose a different school. So just be prepared for that. When you do something for followers, there will be repercussions, and you will deserve them. Let's be sure about that. If you hurt a school, then boy, you deserve everything that you get coming to you. So I think he would be a significant addition. Obviously, I don't know if it was you and Bill talking, or maybe you and Mark talking on one of the shows, that like everybody is now getting projected to be the Leo. And here you go, 6'4", 240. That's right in the wheelhouse of what Jim Knowles talks about, and the ideal makeup of the, at least size wise, of that weak side defensive end that can go stand up and move around and do different things. But
it's the new version of the bullet. It's basically the meme with the guy like holding his girlfriend's hand and turning around to like whistle at the other girl. Like that's the bullet is the girlfriend, and the Leo is the girl walking the other direction. And he's like, "Hey, how you doing?" That is all of the Ohio State speculation right now.
And 3 years ago, it was the bullet and the H back. It's like the Percy Harvin role, and then now you don't concern ourselves with that. But landing 4 defensive linemen would be much better than just landing 3. Obviously, they got 4 good ones last year. This is one of those things where you just kind of keep stacking and stacking, because you really can't have enough great defensive linemen. You can have too many average defensive linemen. And I wonder if Ohio State right now is trying to, are they going to have to replace some guys that haven't yet panned out in year 2 or year 3 or even year 4, and whether this is part of that, or because they're also going to be losing some veterans, a bunch of veterans. We know Tyreek Smith and Haskell Garrett, and we don't know about Teron Vincent yet, but Jerron Cage, Antoine Jackson, just a lot of bodies going. A lot of guys are going to be moving up just because there's nobody else there. And at this point, you need as many defensive linemen as you can, and figure out who you can play, and who can't will probably hit the portal for you if you tell them that's where they should go. And that's just the circle of life in big time college football now. And as long as players are cashing in, so it's hard to feel too sorry for the situation that they're now in. You never want to see anybody just left hung out to dry. But as Urban Meyer used to say to his guys, like, use Ohio State. Don't let Ohio State use you. And all of these guys need to use as much as they can, because it's not like they're kept on rosters for charity.
Right. And I think you're going to have a more so than in previous years, it's going to be important to have depth, because you are going to have so much more turnover this year than you have in previous years. I mean, you're seeing, the transfer portal, like, how many quarterbacks would you feel comfortable having on a roster right now? I mean, it feels like anything more than 2, at least one of them is going to transfer, and you're going to want to have at least 4. And so just constantly there's just churning quarterbacks, and you're churning. I mean, you see churn at running back in places, and churn at wide receiver in places, and offensive linemen and defensive linemen. Like, it feels like all the old math on how many guys you need to take at each position is completely out the window, because you don't, just because you took 5 offensive linemen a year ago, 2 years ago, doesn't mean that you still have 5 offensive linemen. You might only have 2 of those guys now, or you have 2 of your defensive linemen from 2 years ago or 3 years ago. Everyone else is in the portal. That's just, it is going to be more important to have big classes of good players. Because, if it's a big classes full of filler, you're just, that's just more guys who are going to be in the portal a year or 2 from now when they figure out they're not going to see the field. So, yeah, I mean, the quality depth there, and we're going to talk about offensive line in a minute. It is going to be real important for Ohio State to add another offensive lineman, because they've got 3 in the class right now. There's another one who they're in on that. I mean, we talked about deferring to the experts. All of the experts right now are kind of going, maybe. It's Carson Hinsman, the offensive lineman from Wisconsin, who seemed like a Wisconsin lean for a long time, maybe leaning towards Ohio State now, but it's like just a slight lean. He's not, this is not like those old V8 commercials. This is like just a little bit maybe towards Ohio State. Adding a 4th guy there is going to be so important, because that is a spot where it takes a while to get on the field. And if you don't get on the field in a few years, guys start looking, and, you can go, we have seen Ohio State offensive lines where the depth is not there. You don't want to be back in that spot where they were 2018, 17, 18, I think, when it was like they had 12 scholarship offensive linemen at one point. And it was like, that is a big problem. You need to be at 16, 17. And in order to be at 16, 17, you've got to be bringing in 4 or 5 guys every year at this point.
And the problem is you're bringing in 4 to 5 guys every year. You're going to bring in 2 to 3 guys that are never going to play for you, aren't good enough to play for you. If things aren't, if you're kind of having to reach on guys, and that's the situation they find themselves in now. And you look at who they've got committed, and the 3 guys are all listed as tackles, and you talk to everybody and they're like, I don't know if any of these guys can play tackle. And then Carson Hinsman, he's probably going to be a guard. So there are concerns there. And if I think it's pretty obvious that not everybody they brought in the past couple of years are going to end up playing at Ohio State. And that's really just, again, that's part of it. You bring in as many as you can that think can play, and then you figure out who can, try to get everybody obviously up to speed, but you're nobody bats 1,000. And I don't even know if anybody bats 500, especially when it comes to offensive linemen. And the thing is, you have to invest so much for so long, and you still don't know, like, even you're finally into your 4th year. Maybe this is the year that it happens for you, and it doesn't. And now it's like, you've spent so much time on this one person. Would you have been better off? Would he have been better off going to the portal? And when you have to reach and continue to reach, and you look at, the 3 guys they've got committed now: Tigger Shabola, in-state kid, number 114 player in the nation. He's kind of fluctuated a little bit. I know a lot of people were really high on him, and a lot of people were really down on him because he was heavy. But then they watched him play this year, and things were, I guess, better. George Fitzpatrick out of Colorado. When Ohio State goes out to Colorado, it rarely works out, just from the experience. And there's been quite a bit of it, surprisingly. Number 326 player, number 27 tackle. Certainly these are all ranges where guys have succeeded. And so that's not, he's a 4-star guy. Then you get down to the lowest ranked member of Ohio State's class. And this is another one of those. It's Avery Henry out of St. Clairsville, not even in the top 1,000 players, number 119 tackle overall. But again, that doesn't mean he's not going to play. It's just the likelihood of him becoming something is less at Ohio State, because he's so low ranked, and there's just not a lot of history of that. And the more of these kind of guys you add, it can create just bottom heavy lines. And then if you've got too many of these guys, eventually some of them have to play. And that's when things, I guess, really, and I'm not saying Avery Henry can't play. I'm just saying of low ranked guys, if you got too many of those, I mean, they're ranked this low for a reason. Pat Elflein was, and we saw how that was. So it can obviously work, but it just requires more. You have to hit a higher percentage of those, and we'll see. But it's not been the best year of offensive line recruiting for sure.
No, and it feels like there's a certain pattern to the offensive line recruiting where you start the cycle, and it's like, man, they are in on all of these guys, and there's so there are guys who they're looking at as like, well, that's an okay plan B. And, and then by the time the cycle's over, those are the guys that they desperately would like to have. And then, sorry, he's at Kentucky now, you can't get him, and it has been very strange because they will hit certain guys. They will hit with the Paris Johnsons and they will hit with Donovan Jacksons. And so it's not like they're not bringing in any guys, but they're not hitting at the rate that you would expect. You're losing in-state kids to Clemson a lot more than you'd expect. You're losing in-state kids to Kentucky, or Indiana kids to Kentucky a lot more than you'd expect. You should be able to sell Ohio State, better than Kentucky can sell Kentucky, because Kentucky is Kentucky, and like, it's lovely that they play in the SEC, but they play in like the Music City Bowl a lot, or the Outback Bowl a lot. Like, that's fine, but you should be able to beat these teams for these kids. It's happening often enough that, at some point, you're going to have your one-offs. You can write off your Jackson Carmens every once in a while. It's a kid that wanted to go out of state. Okay, that's fine. But when it keeps happening, you keep having the same issues over and over again. At some point, it does become a little bit of a cause for concern. You wonder what Ryan Day's patience level with that's going to be, because, Ryan Day knows as well as anyone, you only need 1 or 2 bad cycles on offensive line to really screw things up for a while. And the tricky thing with offensive line is it's one of the hardest positions to evaluate. So, have the last 2 cycles been bad cycles for Ohio State? Like, you kind of have to wait 2 years and find out, because you don't know. Is Avery Henry the next Pat Elflein? Maybe. Is Avery Henry the next Tommy Brown? Maybe. Like, you don't really know. It's just a very hard position to evaluate, and there's going to be a lot of a lot of growth and development, and it takes a while. And then the problem is, once you get to a point where you realize, hey, some of these guys are not panning out, we're a little bit thin. Well, there's not necessarily, unless you can go find a Jonah Jackson, there's not necessarily an immediate easy fix to get that right immediately.
Yeah, it's difficult. And the projection, then the development, all of it is, it's the probably the most difficult of any of the positions. I think the drama that I will be watching for, the one thing I'll be watching for on Wednesday more than anything else, is Terrence Brooks, cornerback from Little Elm, Texas, same school as Ryan Watts. They didn't really, I don't think, ever crossed paths, though. He is the number 8 corner in the nation, number 59 overall. There's been some thought that he might flip. He had an in-home visit with Texas, I believe, recently. And so that's, anytime you've got a guy who's been committed since June, late June. So it's not like all of June. It was just one day in June 30th. But he's been committed for a while. And now at the 11th hour, he's talking to Texas. Now, he's a Texan. Is it a courtesy thing? Maybe, but it's certainly more than courtesy, because you're listening. This is not I will listen to your timeshare for a full vacation, type of thing. This is come on over. Let's talk. Tell me what you've got, and let's see what we can do, and see if you can convince me to leave Ohio State. So he's listening. And so for me, that'll be the one national intent letter of NLI that I will be watching for tomorrow, as we wait for Ohio State to tweet all of the ones in, or the players to tweet them all in. Like, for me, he is the number one guy to watch tomorrow. And if there's a delay, there's going to be some concerned Buckeye fans and probably some concerned Buckeye coaches.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And yes, sure, you can say it's the in-state school. Well, Caleb Burton is also a Texas kid. And there were, at one point when you were left, there was talk that, maybe he's going to bring Caleb Burton with him to Texas. Caleb Burton did not have an in-home visit with Texas. So that would be a pretty big surprise if Caleb Burton flipped. To your point about the timeshare, I mean, have you read about the Texas boosters? Are we sure he's not getting a free vacation out of that meeting? I mean,
true.
It's at the rate they're going through, NIL stuff. He might have his own private island by the time the recruiting cycle's over. Who's to say? Yeah, it is. That has to be a concern for Ohio State, because that's another spot where you're seeing guys leave. You mentioned Ryan Watts. Ryan Watts just hit the portal. You're seeing guys leave, and that's another spot where you cannot be too thin. You have, they potentially theoretically after this year, but almost certainly after next year, Seven Banks, Cameron Brown, those guys are going to go. Legend Cavazos, theoretically, I think he's a second-year player. So that would be his third year. He could theoretically leave. And then you've got J.K. Johnson and Jordan Hancock, who are both, there's a lot of great expectations for those guys, but they haven't played yet. So you've got Denzel Burke and then question mark. And, again, this is you've had a couple classes where they've missed on guys, or have had the guys flip late. This room looks very different if Clark Phillips does not flip to Utah after Jeff Hafley leaves a couple of years ago. So yeah, they have to make sure they've got, there are other guys in that room. Andre Tarantine, is he going to end up as a safety? Is he going to end up as a corner? We don't really know. He didn't really get a chance to do much this year. So there's talent in that room, but you have to keep those shelves stocked, because this is the transfer portal has turned into what's the term that everyone uses for everything right now when you can't get the kind of spaghetti you want at the grocery store. Supply chain disruption, supply chain interruptions. Like the portal at this point is just like one big supply chain interruption. And, if you can't get a cornerback, like if you miss on a corner now, there's no guarantee that Amazon will get you another cornerback before Christmas. Like sometimes it's stuck on a boat off the Pacific, and maybe the boat with all the maybe the boat with all the cornerbacks got stuck in the Suez Canal. Like these are things that happen, not literally, but kind of, but still kind of. So yeah, I'm interested to see. He is for sure the one that, when that graphic pops up for Ohio State on the Twitter timeline, there's going to be a lot of Ohio State coaches and a lot of Ohio State fans breathing a big sigh of relief, assuming it does happen.
The timeshare stuff. Are you saying the Texas boosters will promise, say, timeshares off the coast of Austin?
I mean, yeah, I mean, Lake Travis, timeshares like in Lake Travis. I don't know. It's yeah, you can stay up in the clock tower, the bell tower. Like, go ahead. Yeah, you can have an apartment up there. Absolutely.
Now, Caleb Burton, you mentioned him. Ohio State did have an in-home visit with him last week, so things look good there. But that's just another one to watch because of the drama with Quinn Ewers and all of that. And they'll certainly be happy when his letter of intent comes in. Tom, any other drama you're looking for tomorrow?
I don't think so. I mean, there's not a whole lot of other guys. I mean, there have been other guys in that class that you've sort of heard flip rumors about. You heard, at one point, J.R. Brown was kind of a big question mark. It sounds like that one's kind of settled down. Ryan Turner was kind of a flip concern at one point. It sounds like that one's settled down. And it doesn't feel like, outside of Carson Hinsman, I don't know that there's anyone that is, going to maybe come in just out of the blue. Like, I don't think Jaheim Singletary is coming back. I don't think any, names like that are going to be coming back. I'm really interested to see what does the board look like for Ohio State after Wednesday? Because that's when, the guys who are still out there all of a sudden become real hot commodities. DeJuan Jones was just kind of like an average 3-star guy. And then because he was one of the guys lingering out there, all of a sudden it was like this real heated Ohio State, Penn State battle and some other teams in there as well. If you need a quarterback, if you need a running back, if you need an offensive lineman, like the guys who are still left, all of a sudden, like, it's the bar at it's the bar at 2:10 a.m. and the lights just came on. And it's like, well, we gotta, people who you weren't necessarily looking at 12:30 all of a sudden look a little different at 2:05 a.m. So it'll be interesting to see how that all shakes out after the dust settles and after the coaching changes or non-changes happen following the Rose Bowl. That's going to be interesting. So this feels like, in previous years, it has felt like that early signing day was kind of basically signing day. And then there were a couple extra little things that happened later. Now it feels like, well, this is a first step. You get everyone signed. And then you see what changes after the Rose Bowl. And then you see who actually shows up on campus. And then, you are no longer like locked in, as much as you were before, just by signing that letter of intent.
And then who can you go get after spring ball when there's another flurry of transfers and you can just go grab somebody to fill up your room or save your season like Jameson Williams, something like that. Who's to say? But there's never a dull moment. There may be a dull couple of days, but it doesn't last. And there's always something going on, some sort of movement going on. And fortunately, it gives us all something to talk about, gives Buckeye fans something to stress out about at times, but that's okay too.
Thank goodness. Finally, something for Buckeye fans to stress out about.
So that will do it for this episode. I want to thank you all for tuning in. Wednesday's going to be a big day. It'll be a fun day. There's going to be so much coverage on BuckeyeScoop.com, so you'll find it all there. Tons of recaps, tons of stories, and all of that good stuff. I believe Mark is in Indianapolis today to talk to Caden Curry about his commitment, perhaps.
That sounds right. Yeah.
So I said it with a question mark. So if I'm wrong, that's okay. It was a question. Can't be wrong with a question. Anyway, want to thank you all for tuning in, and we will talk to you guys tomorrow.